Thank you very much. It's my pleasure now to say a few words of introduction for Dick Olver, the chairman of BAE Systems. Dick has been chairman of BAE for just over 2 years. As chairman, he brings a lifetime of experience from the global energy industry. Prior to his move to BAE, he worked for BP for over 30 years, rising to become Deputy Group Chief Executive and Board Director. Dick's roles at BP included Vice President of the Pipelines business in North America, Head of Corporate Strategy and Chief Executive of BP Exploration in the United States, 5 years as CEO for Exploration and Production across the group. During this time, he helped transform British Petroleum to BP and from a $20 billion firm to a $200 billion global energy leader. In the process, BP became the largest oil and gas producer in the United States. He's had extensive experience doing business internationally, harnessing new technology, and working at the interface between government and industry. Frequently, he led teams bringing together British and American professionals. Dick also brings to this debate an acute awareness of the power of information in today's global society, gained in part from his work as a non-executive director of the Reuters Group. He originally trained as an engineer. Indeed, he obtained first-class honors in civil engineering from City University. He and his wife, Pamela, have 2 daughters. His speech tonight will be taped up to the point of the Q&A, and when the Q&A begins after, he's very graciously consented to do that, the taping will cease. Dick, we welcome you to the Wilson Center, to Washington, of course, and we look forward to your remarks.
Well, Lee, thank you very much indeed for that introduction, and good evening to each one of you. I always think it's great to arrive somewhere and that they make you feel at home by doing something that's sort of like it is at home. So 3 weeks ago when I was here, I had some difficulty in leaving the city because of the rain. And this evening you've come back and done it again for me. It's also, I think, Lee, a point of note that I was here talking not very many months ago, which was a very pleasant occasion. And now we have an invitation to come back, not only to talk, but also to eat. So I think this shows real friendship. I'm sure many people start off their speeches by talking about what Woodrow Wilson might have said. And I understand that he said on one occasion, I may come to other quotes from him, that if I'm to speak for 10 minutes, I need a week for preparation. And if 15 minutes, 3 days would suffice. And if half an hour, 2 days. And if an hour, well, I'm ready now. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that 1 or 2 people have been thinking about this for a little while. So before I start, I'd just like to also acknowledge that as well as all of the eminent people that Lee mentioned that are in the room, there are also members of the BAE Systems Board of Directors and the BAE Systems American Board in the room as well, and I welcome all of those. This evening, what I'd like to do is take a few minutes to talk about this relationship between the US and the UK in the context of a world that really is changing very fast. And in particular, I'd like to talk about that in regard to education, in regard to understanding of other cultures, trade, economics, and of course, defence. This relationship is often referred to as the special relationship. But does it really exist? And if so, is it still relevant today? And how can it help us meet all these big global challenges that we have out there? Well, I'd like to offer a few observations, and then I think what would be really terrific would be to have a conversation. And Lee has graciously agreed to turn the camera off so you can ask any question you like, and more particularly, I can give any answer I like, which is very good. As Lee said, I'll be drawing on experience of BAE, a company that embodies the US-UK relationship in many ways. BAE Systems, of course, is a leading transatlantic, if not the leading transatlantic, defence and aerospace business. We've revenues now of $10 billion a year in the United States. That's about a third of our company. We employ 40,000 people in the United States in 36 of those states. And last year we created 2,000 additional jobs here. What's more, almost 50% of our shareholders are American, and of course our activities extend way beyond the United Kingdom, and we have customers in 100 countries. I'll also draw a little bit upon my experience at BP that Lee mentioned, which is another global enterprise. BP has operations in 100 countries, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Middle East, from Russia to Indonesia, and has over 34,000 employees in the US, and like BAE, has grown through mergers and acquisitions of American companies. In BP's case, of course, the American oil company, Amoco, and Atlantic Richfield Arco. And today I serve still, I seem to be able to get away, as the Deputy Chairman of TNK BP, which is the largest producer of oil in Russia today. And then with Reuters, which is a UK PLC, UK listed and UK resident, which provides insights into a frenetic rate of change in the technology and information sphere, much of it led by the unique environment of Silicon Valley. Reuters, British company, has an American CEO. It has over 4,000 employees in the United States and derives about a third of its revenue here. And it's a wonderful platform to view Friedman's flat world. So my comments tonight derive from experiences in defence, in energy, and in information. Let me turn to the US-UK relationship, and I'd just like to make, first of all, a proposition that few things are as important as relationship in today's world. Relationships are the foundation of all human activity, and the difference between good and bad relationships means the difference between success and failure. Success and failure in marriage, in business, in politics, and arguably in peaceful international relations as well. It won't surprise you to hear that I believe the US and the UK do indeed have a special relationship, a relationship that's based upon our common heritage, our common language, laws, values, financial systems, history of trade, and military cooperation. In the 20th century, the relationship strengthened considerably as a result of 2 world wars. Thousands of personal and professional relationships were established during the Second World War and maintained during the following decades. Among other technical contributions, UK expertise in the Manhattan Project is regarded to have shaved a year off the development of the atomic bomb that, of course, brought to the end of the Second World War. And during that war, British and American forces landed and fought together in Normandy, and they've since fought together in places like Korea, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Close relationships have developed in the areas of nuclear technology and intelligence. Since the 1960s, the UK's nuclear deterrent has been developed and maintained in close cooperation with the US through the creation of a trusted community, echoes of a CSIS paper of some magnitude. Likewise, the legacy of joint intelligence cooperation, formalised in 1948, has been maintained and strengthened in recent years. So what is the state of the relationship today? Well, some of the ties that bind us are not as strong as they once were. The communist Soviet threat has ended, the UK has joined the European Union and does much of its trade with Europe. Meanwhile, the US is apparently, as Donald Rumsfeld has said recently in Singapore, a Pacific nation, with its Asian relationships growing in importance. Iraq and Afghanistan are still binding us together in military activity. But as we know from the polls, it's apparent that both the leaders of our great nations have been weakened by the ongoing challenges there. And as Lee Hamilton will tell you, I'm quite sure readily, there are no easy answers here. But the consequences of Iraq are clearly being felt in domestic politics on both sides of the Atlantic. So is the special relationship still working? And is it still special? Well, I believe it is on both counts. If you look beneath the headlines, I believe our two nations may be becoming even closer. For example, the US is by far the largest investor in the United Kingdom, accounting for almost half of all foreign direct investment projects over the past 4 years. In fact, US-based firms invest as much in the UK as they do in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, and in Ireland, all put together. And the UK is the largest investor in the United States, as well as being the United States' biggest trading partner in services. The US and the UK each have invested over $250 billion in each other's economies. Translating this into jobs, which always seems a good thing to do in this town, the US firms employ about 1.3 million workers in Britain, more than the entire US affiliate workforce in all of developing Asia. And over 1.2 million Americans go to work each day in British-owned companies in the United States. In BAE Systems, I see Britons and Americans working together every day. The same is true at BP and the same is true at Reuters. Many years ago, I could immediately spot who was American and where the accents were different. Nowadays, I've become tone deaf to the American accent because it's come so familiar. And maybe something has happened with my accent as well, because as I walked into the BA lounge in Heathrow 3 weeks ago when I came here last, the special services lady came up to me and she said, "Mr. Olver, it's very nice to see you. You're American, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, no. I think I'm British, but I have lived in America quite a lot, and maybe it's just a mid-Atlantic twang." Anyway, on the education front, over the past 50 years, approximately 12,000 UK nationals have studied in the United States, including me. And 9,600 US nationals have studied in the UK on the Fulbright Educational Exchange Programme. And the numbers of US students pursuing an undergraduate degree at UK institutions has more than doubled to nearly 3,000 over the past 8 years. R&D cooperation has also flourished. The tradition of U.S.-UK research cooperation, exemplified by the pioneers of DNA, Watson and Crick, is very much alive. Recently, British and American scientists shared the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 3 consecutive years. And in defence, the relationship, of course, is very substantial. In addition to the collaboration in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's unparalleled bilateral cooperation on the nuclear deterrent and intelligence. Our military officers and soldiers frequently work and train side by side. In fact, the degree of collaboration is such that British officers participated in the preparation of the recent US QDR. Our defence industries also collaborate closely. The Harrier aircraft is a classic example of two-way collaboration and of mutual benefit, and the Joint Strike Fighter will continue that partnership well into the future. In fact, the UK is the only Level 1 international partner on the recently named F-35 Lightning II, the largest US aircraft procurement project in history. and one that now will carry on the legacy of those two great aeroplanes which were found in America and, of course, in British history as well, the Lightnings. The M777 howitzer is another good example of transatlantic cooperation. It is 42% lighter than the M198 it replaces, which allows it to be transported by helicopter or truck. It's produced by BAE Systems in the UK and in the United States, which makes about 70% of the parts. It is now being fielded by the US Marines and the US Army. In recognition of the importance of our relationship, the US Congress in early March stood up a UK caucus, which has already grown to become one of the largest on Capitol Hill. So there is much that binds us together. Our laws, our heritage, our friendships, our families, our culture, and our recent history, and the things that we do together. So what are the big challenges facing the US and the UK? Well, you won't be surprised to learn that I believe they are great. We're entering a new world, as challenging as anything that Columbus or the Pilgrim Fathers encountered. Globalization, trade and development have changed the world, largely for the better. As trade has increased, so too, of course, have life expectancy and living standards. The population is growing fast. When I was born, some time ago, there were fewer than 3 billion people on the planet, and now there are nearly 7. Around 260 people are born every minute, and that's another 10,000 people before I sit down tonight. Don't rush to your calculators to find out how long I'm going to speak for. The world's population is expected to grow to around 9 billion by 2050, and most of the increases will be in the developing world. And while population boom in the developing countries, the population is aging in the developed world, increasing health and social security costs and putting pressure on other budgets, defence budgets and discretionary spending. Emerging economies are racing to develop their skills capacity. Recent estimates suggest that China has around 600,000 engineering graduates a year and India 350,000. This compares with just 70,000 in the United States and 20,000 in the United Kingdom. And for the cost of one engineer in the US or the UK, you can, of course, hire 10 in India. And I found it interesting in Palo Alto the other day to learn that 60% of Yahoo's engineers are not American. This, of course, is not a thing that we can do in the defence industry. We need US and UK nationals. And technology is also changing the world. Around a sixth of the world's population has internet access. And if you only limit that calculation to the people who have wires in their home, then half the world's population has access to the internet. Global GDP is increasing by 3 or 4% a year, and in many nations the rising tide is lifting millions out of poverty. But sadly, this is not true everywhere. There are still billions suffering in poverty and oppression and living with a lack of hope and sometimes resentment. Energy security is a growing concern, given the dependence of major consumer nations such as the US, the European countries, China and India on imported oil and gas from the Middle East, Africa and Russia. So in the long term, and I speak very broadly, oil will come from the Middle East and gas will come from Russia. What does that say about relationships and the need to engage? In terms of security, terrorism is a massive challenge and one that has brought the US and the UK together. We Britons were incredibly affected by the 9/11 terrorist attacks. For us in the UK, just like so many in the US, this was a wake-up call that we were facing a new threat in the post-Cold War world. Likewise, the outpouring of American support following the 7/7 bombings in London was deeply felt in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, terrorist tactics remain a persistent threat, and we, of course, have witnessed that in Madrid in 2004, and, of course, this week in Mumbai. Other security concerns, again shared in the US and the UK, are those related to North Korea and Iran. There's also the ongoing conflict and tension between Israel and Palestine, and many other conflicts around the world, including in Africa. China's rapid economic growth is being accompanied by military activity, and there's been some concern over the unknown unknowns in that regard. So we are challenged. We're challenged by globalization, by population growth, by economic growth, by technology, by energy, security, terrorism, and so on. So how should we respond? How should we respond to these challenges? Political leaders face hugely difficult decisions. And I have to say, it's very easy to criticise, but it's very hard to be the person for whom the buck stops. So I'll not be an armchair politician, and I'll only do what I feel somewhat qualified to do, which is to observe what works in business and how that might be applied. I inhabit a global business world in which the players are international companies. This world is overlain, sometimes uncomfortably, on the world of nation states. And in this simpler world of business, I've learned a few things. Education leads to achievement, prosperity, and fulfillment. But lack of education leads to ignorance, poverty, and resentment. Experience of different cultures leads to understanding and good judgment. But lack of such experience leads to misunderstanding and misjudgment. Diversity among teams leads to better decisions that enhance value. The free market drives competition, which enables the best products and companies to succeed and provides the best deal for consumers. But attempts to interfere with the market inevitably backfire. Trade develops close partnerships amongst nations, and close trading partners do not make war against each other. So based on these principles, what should the US and the UK do to confront the multiple challenges of this new world? Well, let me just give you the headlines that I think we need to do. I think we need to do three things. One, we need to maintain high value-adding, open economies founded on well-educated and well-informed populations. Two, we need to support free trade and resist insularity, this with considerable passion. And three, we need to maintain unbeatable defence and peacemaking capabilities within our means. I believe the economic strategy for both the US and the UK should be one of innovation, knowledge and enterprise. We may not be able to compete on numbers of graduates or labour costs, but we can develop more highly skilled engineers, and we can invent the technologies which the entire world's engineers will work on in future decades. The US has the highest R&D investment intensity in the world, but it needs to maintain its lead as well as boosting the number of skilled knowledge workers. I'm aware that the US has focused on this area recently, and I admire greatly the report produced by the National Academies Committee under Norm Augustine, a man from this industry, and Roy Vagelos, entitled Rising Above the Gathering Storm. That report recommended increased investment in R&D as well as scholarships to recruit 10,000 science and mathematics teachers, and by that, reaching 10 million minds. This issue was addressed by the President back in February in his commitment to American Competitiveness Initiative with a proposed eye-popping, real money, $136 billion of investment over 10 years in research, education, teacher training and other measures. I hope that gets through the bureaucratic requirements. The UK is looking at similar initiatives, and I really hope they come about. They're less mature. But in particular, I'd like to see the UK increase its R&D spending to 3% of GDP, which of course is what they promised in the Lisbon Agenda, and also implement a version of the 10 million minds proposal by increasing the number of science, technology and engineering teachers. Improving education means not only increasing skills, but spreading understanding. In a survey in the United Kingdom in 2004, a majority thought that the Battle of the Bulge was a fiction. And in a survey here, only a third of young Americans could find Iraq on the map, and half could not find New York. This is one small indication of the need to widen people's horizons. I believe that we need to provide young people with more opportunity to experience the world, to extend, if you will, the Fulbright model. This is particularly important when countries with very different traditions to ours are set to become a major influence in the world. Countries like Russia, the gas, India, China, Indonesia, Brazil, and of course, all the Middle East countries. These countries do not have long democratic traditions. They've had more autocratic and dynastic governments. They've experienced totalitarianism or dominant religions, but they cannot be seen as subordinate. And it's important to overcome that primitive reflex that foreign equals bad. They have to be, on the other hand, understood and engaged. Through travel and education, we learn to accept other cultures rather than insist they become like us. We react with understanding rather than suspicion. We learn not to confuse the difference with danger. And we also learn to spot the real danger when it occurs. So engagement and understanding would be, I think, a good indicator of what to do now with some of the world's largest problems. Greater understanding also encourages voters to demand real solutions and not to be satisfied by superficial gestures. This is vital because hasty action can lead to adverse reactions which sow the seeds of antagonism. This particularly applies in trade. We live in what threatens to be a protectionist era. The controversy over the Dubai Ports World is only one example. The French government has sought to protect Danone. For those who don't live in Europe, that's the yogurt maker, and promoted a merger that would save Suez, that's the gas and utility company, water and utility, from a foreign takeover. The Indian government's restricted foreign investment in telecoms, possibly in response to the difficulties of India's VNSL had in operating in the United States. And President Putin has talked of a law to protect what he calls strategic industries. I think I know what that is. The IMF chief economist, Raghuram Rajan, has said multilateralism is in retreat everywhere. The WTO Doha round is in jeopardy of not accomplishing objectives due to the protectionist support of farmers and other interests. And in the US, if President Bush is not granted an extension of the fast-track trade authority, there's a danger that Congress will fail to approve the resulting agreement. There are now siren voices in the US calling for more and more restrictions on foreign investment. And these are being heard most vocally in the debate over the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS. In this debate, it is again essential to overcome the reflex that foreign equals bad. Foreign investment supports over 5 million United States jobs, And at a time when the United States manufacturing employment is declining, almost 35% of the jobs created by foreign firms in this country are in manufacturing. Foreign can indeed be good. The issue in the CFIUS debate is to enable the committee to approve, not to repel, investments that will enhance the US economy at the same time as dealing with the real threats, if there are any, of national security. I suspect that here tonight there are many who support free trade and oppose protectionism, and my request to all of them would to be more vocal, to speak up with more passion, because it sounded to me not very long ago that this was slipping in the wrong direction in the Senate, and I think the Shelby bill should be left to another moment. I was, on the other hand, delighted to see that the new Treasury Secretary, Hank Paulson, had spoken up on this issue during his confirmation hearings, and he said a reduction in foreign investment would cost American workers good jobs, reduce innovation, and lower the growth of the United States economy. Therefore, any reforms of CFIUS process should send a signal that the United States is serious about national security, but welcomes legitimate foreign investment. Amen to that. Moving on to security and military matters, the forces of trade and technology I described earlier are bringing people closer together. Generally, I believe that's a good thing because it promotes trade and mutual understanding. However, it also creates tension as different worldviews clash in cyberspace and in physical space. The world still contains dangerous polarizations, for example, between radical Islam and liberal Western society and capitalism. Our overwhelming conventional military strength has caused terrorist enemies to adopt unconventional tactics and attack where we are weak, to adopt the asymmetric approach. For the United States and the United Kingdom, this translates in military terms into a need to fight wars of intervention if necessary, a need to protect our populations from terrorism, and a continuing need to be able to fight a war of defence should that threat arise. This is a growing challenge, with the pressure on government budgets and shortages of skilled engineers. We cannot afford to waste a cent, to waste a penny, or to waste a brain cell from either side of the Atlantic. We need to work together well. And I'm encouraged, just encouraged, by the good progress that has been made. I'm delighted that President Bush and the UK Prime Minister recently made a very positive statement about defence cooperation, including the commitment to enable the UK to have the sovereign ability to maintain and upgrade the Joint Strike Fighter. I'm optimistic that our governments can establish a broad-based agreement to enable technology sharing in US and UK defence cooperation, similar to the agreements that exist within the intelligence, operations and nuclear fields. So I applaud the political courage that has led the two leaders to make the statement they did, and I hope that those hammering out the details also feel the hand of history on their shoulders, because this one really matters and implementation is everything. And when I was flying in this direction, I was reading a lot of paper, and I literally came upon a little bit of a few words that were written by Churchill in 1946. And they were spoken by him in the United States at Westminster College, Fulton, Missouri, and he was talking about the special relationship. Maybe he coined the word special relationship. But what he said is vital about implementing the right conditions for sharing of technology. He said, "This is no time for generalities, and I will venture to be precise. Fraternal association requires not only the growing friendship and mutual understanding between our two vast but kindred systems of society, but the continuance of the intimate relationship between our military advisors, leading to common study of potential dangers, the similarity of weapons and manuals of instructions, and to the interchange of officers and cadets at technical colleges. It should carry with it the continuance of the present facilities for mutual security. Difficult to believe it was said 60 years ago. Well, of course, like a marriage, the relationship between nations requires care and feeding. It needs open and honest dialogue. We need to be aware of nuanced communications sometimes not being understood. I hope I have been understood tonight, but I would do just recall being in Houston as the chief executive of BP in the United States, and I'd been there about 2 weeks. And, of course, I knew people very well. And the head of the business down there and the head of human resources came to my office after 2 weeks, and they said, "Dick," they said, "you know, it's really lovely to have you here. And we know that when you say, you know, it would be very nice if you guys could just get that well drilled by the end of the week. What you really mean is get that bloody thing finished in the next 3.5 days or you're for the chop." Now, we know that's what you mean, but you don't say it, but you need to down here. So I hope that I've been reasonably clear here and there in this speech, and if I've not, I'll be clear in questions. Anyway, we need to consider the other's point of view before speaking and acting. We need a commitment to understanding, supporting each other when possible, agreeing to disagree when not, and we need to give and receive gifts, symbolic gestures, if you will, to show we care. History has shown that when our great nations are aligned, working together on problems, the results are better than either of us could have achieved on our own. We need to recognise that there will always be perturbations in any relationship. The strength of the U.S.-U.K. relationship is that these perturbations have never and should never undermine the fundamental alignment. Our sights should be on a world in which security is the norm, while not taken for granted, and comparative advantage is pursued by economic means. As Woodrow Wilson said, there must be not a balance of power, but a community of power. Not organised rivalries, but an organised common peace. I believe that the US and the UK can together be instrumental in creating such a community if they deploy their full combined capabilities. The UK led the world in the 19th century, and the US led the world in the 20th century. And in the 21st century, the job may be vacant. But I believe that the US and the UK could fill that vacancy and give the world the much-needed leadership that it needs. To achieve this, we both need to invest in each other. We need to invest in innovation and human capability, primarily through education and understanding, to champion those free markets, to maintain strong cooperation to ensure defence is unparalleled. We stand on the brink of a new world in which old certainties will be overturned. In the US and the UK, we need to use all of our combined experience, our wisdom, our judgment, skills and partnership if we're to retain our leadership. But if we continue to work together effectively, then I believe we can help to shape the future world, not only, of course, for our benefit, but for the benefit of all its peoples. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Dick, for a most insightful and even wise speech. I think many of you have heard, as I have, a good many speeches on the special relationship. This is right among the very best that I've heard. It was marvelously well done. Let's open it up for a few questions here very quickly.
Let's remind
I can't believe